So here I want to go through recreating mesh from curved surfaces. So here's a sample part with some curvy surfaces from Fillets. I made this pretty quick in FreeCAD. You can download this from GrabCAD if you like. So I've saved this as an STL file, and now I'm going to go ahead and open it. So here's an STL file of the same thing. You can download this with GrabCAD from my GrabCAD in the description if you'd like to follow along. And sometimes it can help to see the mesh. And that can be easy as changing our draw style to something like flat lines. And now you can see all the flat faces that are put together to represent something that's curved. And the big question is, how do I make this have actual curvature again? And there's a few methods, and probably no right and wrongs depending on your design intent. But here's a few tools on how you can start to re-smooth some of these meshes. This is a good example here. If I go to the front view, right, this is a bunch of very straight lines that are put together to become something that's curved. So to edit this, one very effective way is to turn this into a solid. As of right now, this is just a graphics body. So to make this solid, we'll head on over to Part. Sorry, I'm in the Part workbench. Let's head on over to Highlight this mesh body, and we're going to say Part, Create Shape from Mesh. Right, so we've created a shape, or at least there we go. You see it pop up in the history tree here on the left. We've created a shape from the mesh. Now I can highlight this shape in the history tree, and we're going to say Part, Convert to Solid, and that's how we make a solid. Now I can even delete these two things if I wish. I'm going to hide them with the spacebar for now. And now I can choose any part of this and go to my sketcher and create a sketch. We're going to choose the flat face option, of course, so we're sketching on the face. And now I can make a circle, right? I can import this line, and I can create a circle. Maybe we'll make it coincident onto there, and I'll choose my center point of my circle and choose a coincident onto there. And I can just make this circle a little bit bigger than my mesh. I can even, since this is a bunch of straight lines, I could probably make the assumption that I can import a point here and make my circle coincident onto that point, and assume that the circle is going to turn all of these sections into smooth sections. Now, to avoid any possible zero thickness from a Boolean operation, I'm going to assume that I have the tolerance to make my circle a little bit bigger, right? So maybe 10.15 millimeters, that's probably a 10 millimeter circle. We'll close that. We'll go to the Part workbench. We're going to extrude. We'll go 10 millimeters, and let's see if I can find my reverse. In fact, I think even symmetric would work. There we go, reversed. Symmetric and reverse kind of undo each other, so I'll just choose reverse and we'll say OK. I'll choose my body, I'll choose my extrusion, and choose make a cut of two shapes. And now I have a very smooth circle, right? So that's one way that I've just added some smoothness into a mesh body. I can also go back into my tree and edit my sketch, and I can get rid of my dimension. So one of the complicating factors of doing this method, which is probably better, if I close this, my circle is going to be extruded through every sharp point, and so you would assume that this is curved, but you still have every individual face, which may give the appearance that it is not curved. So be careful doing that method, and you have possible zero thickness complications that is just going to be apparent in every CAD platform because of the way that zero thickness works, right? You have that in SolidWorks, you have that everywhere. So what's another way that I can work with this? And this is a pretty simple part, right? And if I just roll this back, let's see, let me get rid of my cut with delete, and we'll get rid of that and that. And so now we just have this solid, and then of course everything else in the tree is invisible right now. One way is I can say go to my something like Part or Part Design workbench. I'll go to my sketcher, but this will probably work in either part or part design. I'll start sketching on my top plane. I can simply remake this part in a simple way as I can, and I'll toggle my transparency to wireframe. And I'll choose, something like symmetric, and then I can import something here. And I can just start using my solid as a reference to make this part all over again. Now, anybody watching this is probably very familiar with all the operations that I'm doing, so I'll just try to go through this really quick so I don't waste anyone's time. We'll close that, back to part, we'll do an extrude, and I don't recall how tall this was, so I'm going to start with something like 30. And I got it. That's got to be 30. That's perfect. And then I'll add a few fillets maybe, and I'll change this, of course, back to as is. So I can add a few fillets, and I'll in fact select this edge and then choose fillet. And I don't recall exactly. I'm guessing it's going to be a 5mm fillet. Nope, that's probably a 10mm fillet. So let's go back and edit my fillet edges, and I'm going to say 10. Right, you can just use this solid as a way to perfectly match everything you're doing. There, so I've selected all my edges that I wish to fillet, and I've done my fillet, and then I can go here, and I'm guessing that's like a 3mm shell. Let's give that a try, right? We'll say there's extrude, apply a thickness. We'll try making that maybe 5mm, and I want to have my thickness towards the inside, so maybe I'll stick a negative sign on there. And yeah, I think it's 3. Let's try 3. Nope, we're a bit inside, so 3.5. There we go. So it's 3.5mm, and it's just so easy when you're at least working with a model that has some nice round numbers to remake that. And that didn't take me very long to remake, right? So you can use your solid as a reference when you sketch and make things to remake this curve from the first place. But you bet there is some more techniques that can be used. And there's one that I'm really excited about. So I'm going to get rid of the solid that I've been making and get rid of my sketch. All right, so we're back to this solid. This is a pretty exciting one. Let me go to the surface workbench. I'm still working with a solid, and I need to have a solid to do this. So be sure to convert this to a solid. And this is FreeCAD 019, where you have some cool new features, but this should be available in 018 as well. This little filled surface here. And I can choose my boundary edges, right? I can add an edge here, and add an edge here, and here, right? I'm just choosing, and this is especially useful that I can see my mesh so I know which ones to choose. Add an edge here, and I can say, okay. And if I go transparent, you can see I've rebuilt this face as a surface. And then I'll come over here and I'll choose another filled surface. And as you can see, I am remaking the planar or straight or otherwise predictable surfaces as surfaces here. There we go. And that one, right? Okay, and now I've got two faces rebuilt. And I'll fast forward here so you don't have to sit through the monotony of me doing this, but I'm going to rebuild all my easy to make straight surfaces. Now this one is a little bit more challenging because you can tell we have mesh, which makes a bunch of, straight edges seem like, which approximates the curvature through a bunch of straight edges. So what we're going to do instead is I'm going to sketch on this face with the sketcher. And then it should be pretty easy to identify things that I can import, right, from here to here. Yep, to here. Right, so I have these nice lines. And then I simply draw an arc. I can, on my keyboard, which I'll bring up my keyboard monitor since I'm going to use a hotkey here. Here's my keyboard monitor. If you need to see my hotkeys, I'm going to say T for tangent. And that fully defines our arc. And I'll simply do the same thing on each of the four corners. So I don't even have to know my arc size because that just comes from how I've imported my mesh. Oh, looks like I need to import this side as well. And then this last one. So I've been able to quote unquote add some curvature through the sketch back in. And I'll add 4 lines now. Line here, line here, whoop, line here, and line there, right? So I've used my solid to create this sketch. We'll close that. And now with my sketch highlighted, I can head on over to the surface workbench and simply fill that like it's a surface. And I can also, let's actually hide this body here. And now click on the filled surface and we can add some edges. And we're adding edges on the sketch just like we've added edges from the solid. It computationally should be one and the same. So we've added all this. And okay, right? So now I can utilize my surfacing to be able to restore additional curvature. And it should be pretty easy to head on back to the sketcher. I'm going to choose this line and the end of this line, which will establish a plane normal to the edge that I've just selected. And we choose to make a sketch, and instead of 3 points plane, we want to make sure we'll say normal to edge, and our sketch plane, right, is right on that edge. We selected this edge and this point, and we've made a plane normal to the edge that we're sketching on. I click my import, and I can import this point here. And I simply draw an arc. And in this case, there's many ways to do this, right? We can do a swept surface, or we can do what I like to do, a filled surface. It seems nice and reliable. First things first, I'm going to select, let me get normal to my plane here. There we go. I want to choose my origin and this point, and we'll put those together. And then I can choose my arc center. I'll make a vertical constraint there. You can also just put it right on the axis if you wish. But we are constrained there. We'll do the same thing. Right, we'll choose this point, this edge from our sketcher. We'll do normal to edge. And we've established a sketch plane now on that bottom edge. And I can import this here. And this is just a personal preference. You can do a center point arc if you wish. I like to grab both ends with a rim point arc and establish E equal. Right, hit the E key. There's my equal. Close that. And now I'm back again to going to the surface workbench. We can choose a filled surface from here. We'll add an edge here, here, And I'll just add another edge, even though it's probably unnecessary. And we've established another surface. We'll do the same thing. Right, I'm going to do the exact same thing right here, so I won't bore you. I'll just fast forward through this. Great, so we've added and restored our curvature to these two edges. How do we continue on with FreeCAD? Let's go with showing my solid once more. This time, how do we deal with this? Well, I mean, there's a few ways, right? I can make a sketch and just draw a rectangle to represent this whole face and make the cut later, which is how I feel inclined to do it. Or I can try to tough through it some other way, but I think it's easiest really to sketch on this face, right? So we'll head to our sketcher, create a sketch, because all we care about is 4 points. We care about this point, and I imported a line there, but it ends at the point that I care about. We care about that point, and lastly that one. And as before, I simply use a surface to fill that in. So I'll make that invisible. We'll do a filled surface, and we'll add here, and this edge, and here. It's probably not necessary, but I'll add that fourth one as well. And then I can go ahead and add in these two. Now, what if I went to Part and chose Mirror, and I mirrored, let's see, I think it's Surface Fill 005, and I did so across the YZ plane. Right, so that option is open to you, right? So you can mirror stuff, and I'm just going to Control Z back before I made the mirror. And I'm going to say 004 and 005 across my XZ plane, or my YZ rather. I've been able to recreate those surfaces a lot more quickly. So, last thing to do. How do I fill in this bottom portion? So what I'll do, and there's really, again, no set in stone way of doing this, right? You could probably get this done with a sweep. In fact, let's try that, right? Because we haven't tried that. But these are going to line up, so I can choose here. Oh. I have to choose this little endpoint. In fact, I'll use the space bar and hide that so I can select that endpoint and that line. We'll grab our sketcher and we'll sketch. Whoops, I think that thought it was a 3-point plane, so let me try that one more time. There in the endpoint, we'll sketch this with a normal to edge. There we go. Let's import this line, or that point there. And I can choose that arc. We'll go horizontal. Bam, just like that, right? So we'll close that. And now we can probably just do a sweep. Let's find out. All right, we'll run to the part workbench. We'll run through utility to sweep. I'm going to choose my latest sketch as a profile. I'm going to hold Control for my sweep path and select this entire circle. We're going to say done, okay. And we've recreated that curvature really easily, right? That is one easy way of doing it. Let me delete that now. And let's go with one other way of doing this. I'm going to make another sketch. Well, see, you can kind of mirror what we've done before. And choose Sketcher. Normal to edge. And even easier, we can import our last sketch. And of course, my personal way of doing this is a rim point arc that's made equal. You can also do a 3-point arc on the 3 fully defined points. We're going to say close to that. Same thing here. We'll sketch normal to edge, which is a super handy feature that FreeCAD has. I'm sure it's been around for a while, but some of these convenient features really don't get old. Horizontal. We'll close that, right? And what I've really essentially have done is I've enabled myself to go to the surface workbench. We can create a filled surface here. We'll add an edge there. So I've added all these edges and I've created that. But this can be a filled surface too, because I've kind of made this sketch wireframe, if you will. Right, but there are some possible, oh, that actually looks really good though. There's some possible imperfections or things that could happen, but that's another way of doing it. I like the sweep myself, but I wanted to show another method of doing it because sometimes one method won't completely work. And then it's pretty easy to just fill a surface across these bottom. Actually, I think I've already done and I've made that invisible, right? So we'll just make that non-invisible. All right, so we've got this. Now there's a few ways to do it, right? You can try to maybe do a union between all these surfaces and do an offset and fill the offset and whatnot. I think the most simple way of doing it is kind of replicating how we made the part in the first place. So I'll go to the surface. Right, we're going to do a filled surface, and I'm just going to add edges, and this will lead me to filling in the top. Okay, and then we can head on down to curves. This is an added-in workbench, and you can find add-in videos on my channel on how to add that in if you need. And then we have this, where's my green square? There we go. So I'll highlight all my surfaces. I see it now. I've got my little green. I guess it's a cube. But I have to highlight everything. And this works when you make a watertight solid, right? And then here we have make a parametric solid from selected faces. So I'll do that. And then there's my solid. I've hid my surfaces. There we go, and I'll show my solid, right? So that's the solid that I've made, shows up in my tree, and I can head on over to Part. We'll choose Utility to apply a thickness. I'm going to make that. There's -1. And I'll just step this up to -3.5. So that's one way of doing it, right? There's many ways of doing it, but now I was going to go into how to do NURBS surfaces, which is a different concept entirely. But this seems to be running a really long time, a lot longer than I intended. So let's make this part 2, NURBS surfaces. I'll see you next week. I hope this video was helpful. If it was, please subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.